Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are picking up with DC's Infinite Frontier. Now, for those of you guys who don't know what Infinite Frontier is, this is kind of the next official move of DC Comics. Future State was not necessarily that. It was an interlude, right? So to give you guys a better perspective, if the events of Death Metal was like a giant movie, then Future State was like the intermission, right? Where like you go and get popcorn. And now that we're back in our seats continuing the movie, we're picking up with Infinite Frontier. That's essentially what this is. And so the idea here is this initially picks up with Wonder Woman, right? In the aftermath of everything that had happened with regards to the deaths of like Perpetua and the Batman Who Laughs, the reformation of the timeline in the multiverse, which is to say the idea that like the multiverse had kind of been rebooted over the years and all that was basically done. So now like everything that's ever happened in the multiverse has actually happened. All the crisis events actually took place, but instead of people forgetting about what happened after those crisis events, now they remember everything, right? So in essence, it's kind of like what the New 52 should have been, like if New 52 never happened, how like everything sort of would have progressed, right? I guess is the best way to think about it. But Wonder Woman here is ultimately met by the arrival of the Quintessence, right? The Phantom Stranger, the Spectre, these people out there who sort of embody these differing powers and are in effect the higher echelon of beings that exist out there, right? So the hierarchy of DC Comics in recent years has really been in a state of flux, that we still have beings out there like the Presence, who is in effect God, Lucifer Morningstar, like Gabriel, the Angel Michael, like we still have those guys out there. But one of the things that we've consistently reiterated here is that when it comes to DC's landscape regarding like their angels and demons and that kind of pantheon of power, that while it does consider itself inclusive in the hierarchy of DC Comics, you never really see them cross over with like the main DC superheroes, right? So with the exception of like Eclipso, who's like the embodiment of God's wrath, you don't really see, and really the Spectre, I guess, you don't really see like Lucifer showing up and facing off against the Justice League, or the Presence showing up and saying, Justice League, there's a major crisis here, we got to go face off against it. You never really see that, right? But they are part and parcel to the entire DC landscape, therefore they are taken into account with regards to the hierarchy. But as far as the main DC landscape goes with the various superheroes, the Quintessence are the most powerful beings out there in the multiverse. That's leaving out, again, all the other pantheon of gods and stuff that you see with like Lucifer, the Presence, and so on and so forth. Those guys are beyond the Quintessence, right? Those guys' powers are way beyond the Quintessence. But as far as we're concerned, these are the top dogs here. And because of the fact that Wonder Woman is kind of designed to be this kind of living force by which the multiverse was more or less recreated, that she's offered a position among the Quintessence. Now, what this would mean is she would just enter a higher state of entropy, and she would not really have any involvement with any of the main DC characters. It's something that they would do if they felt like just shuffling Wonder Woman off to the cornfields. So this is something that would definitely happen if it were a lesser character, right? If it was somebody like Alan Scott, the Green Lantern, or if it was like Jay Garrick, or if they were wanting to get rid of Barry Allen and just replace him with Wally West for like years to come, then they would throw them onto the Quintessence. Wonder Woman kind of approaches this from like, I would, but there's a major threat. Like I was told there was a price to be paid for essentially saving the multiverse and bringing it back. I don't quite know what this price is yet, but I'm trying to figure it out. And so the result is that the Spectre travels with Wonder Woman to basically move around the Earth as it exists now and then find out what that threat is. Now, the reality is that for us as the reader, this is a zero issue, right? So it's basically just a way for DC Comics to kind of give us a tour of what the stories are going to look like. It's a showcase comic is really all it is. And so one of the first things we see here, we're not going to cover every single thing here because not everything's relevant or it doesn't really have any useful purpose, and it wouldn't really give us anything that we wouldn't see in like issue number 1 of whatever those stories are. But I will run over like what the issue relaunches are going to be once we get to the end of this. But we initially pick up with Superman, and Superman kind of showing up here is facing off, or at least, you know, initially looks like he's going to face off against this, you know, giant monster, only to be told that the day was saved by a person that calls himself Shazadam. And then Superman's like, no, you're talking about Shazam. And they're like, no, he attacked this guy, he basically saved us, he's like you, he comes and goes, he does it quietly, doesn't really make a great big huge stink, and he's like, he calls himself Shazadam. And that's when we realized that Bleeding Cool was right for one of the very few times they ever are, where it turns out that DC Comics is actually renaming Black Adam to Shazadam. Have a field day, guys. The comments are gonna go bananas. You guys are gonna lose your mind in the comment section, I can already tell, because it is kind of a dumb name. But nonetheless, go forward and do your thing, right? I mean, we're not here to be negative Nancy's. We're here to just kind of tell you guys what's going on at the moment, to make it all make sense and to explain it all. But yeah, like Black Adam, and here's kind of the cool thing that I do like about this though, because we haven't really seen where the story from Future State goes. Granted, the Black Adam Future State story is in the future, right? So it's just a potential future of where Black Adam would end up being. It looks like they're moving in that direction of him essentially becoming a good guy. In Future State, he was more of like a monk, if anything. He really wasn't like a fighter or anything along those lines. But the important thing here is that Black Adam is in effect turning over a new leaf. So it looks like it's also coming off the heels of the end of Jeff Johns' Shazam run, where Black Adam had basically joined the Shazam family, right? He wasn't necessarily an official member of the family. He still had his own source of power and so on, but he was basically a good guy. And that looks like where things are going, that he is in effect becoming a good guy here, which is actually really cool. I'm pretty excited about this. What this means for like the Rock Black Adam movie, I have no idea. Presumably it's because, you know, he's going to become a good guy at the end of the movie and all that kind of good stuff. But the important thing is that Black Adam is making his way to becoming a hero, right? So obviously Black Adam is not the threat they worry about. The next thing we end up doing is moving to Gotham City, right? Where you basically have this guard kind of making his way through Arkham Asylum. And as he gets to the cell of Bane, of course, his job is to check on the various villains to make sure that they're locked up as they're supposed to be. When it's 11:53 p.m., he gets to the cell of Bane and then basically finds one of the guards standing in Bane's cell is dead, right? Immediately assumes it's Bane, right? It just initially goes to attack Bane, only to find out Bane has been Jokerized and then killed. And so in effect, this massive attack goes on in Arkham Asylum where every single person has been Jokerized, but none of them are laughing, right? They're all basically dead. The next thing it does following that is it switches over to Oracle, which is good to see that Barbara Gordon is maintaining the role of Oracle. I love that character for her. If I were being honest, I wish that DC would find a way to blend Batgirl and Oracle together, so she was basically playing both roles. I loved it when she did it in the past, and I would love to see it brought back. It is kind of tough to do. It's hard to have her be like the information broker and kind of like the eyes and ears in everything everybody's doing, and then at the same time be Batgirl, right? Like one role is literally the opposite of the other, so I don't really know exactly how you make those two things work together. We do get Huntress back, which is cool. Huntress is here, so that's going to be interesting to see for those of you guys who are Batgirl fans. I know a lot of you guys out there do enjoy Batgirl. I think Becky Cloonan is the one who's writing this. I know she's writing Wonder Woman, so I'm not entirely sure if she's going to be handling Batgirl. I hope so, because Becky Cloonan is ridiculously talented. It's stupid how good of a writer she is. But ultimately, it looks like another Joker attack is going on. And so ultimately you have Batman who responds to this member of the Arkham security force, and it's kind of like, I'm on my way, right? Like, just stay on the line, and things kind of go from there. So this of course leads into a new attack by the Joker, which I'm actually interested in seeing. I know there will be some naysayers who are like, we just got out of an attack by the Joker, but like, I'm kind of excited. Like, I'm pretty excited to see where this ends up going. One of the coolest things to come out of this, and this is where you actually get Becky Cloonan writing, which I'm exceedingly excited about, is Wonder Woman and Spectre ends up transitioning to Themyscira. Now they go to Themyscira because of the fact that Wonder Woman realizes her mother's still grieving over her death, over basically her vanishing, her perceived death, that she basically died to save the multiverse. And so what you end up having here is that in the aftermath of Wonder Woman's death, you have a whole bunch of women who are here basically vying for Wonder Woman's position, right? Who are vying for her spot. The top person looks to be a woman named Nubia, who basically seems to be like the most capable and strongest of all the women inside Themyscira and the most likely person to take over the mantle of Wonder Woman. And that Hippolyta is initially, I wouldn't really say against it. She's just kind of like, you guys are already gunning for my daughter's position, which is a little offensive. But at the same time, the important thing to understand here is that honor and pride are exceedingly important among the Amazons, and that this show goes on. And so while Wonder Woman has basically, is believed to have been dead, the reality of this is that Themyscira still needs to send somebody out there to fight on the side of the Justice League and to fight and to basically represent Themyscira in the world of man, since they're now more on the global space, or more in the global space than they were previously. Wonder Woman kind of opened those doors, so they're not as cut off as they used to be. Now I imagine that if Themyscira was like, no, after the loss of Wonder Woman, we're just not doing this anymore, I doubt anybody would really be pissed off about that. They'd be like, oh, we kind of understand, right? Like, the one time you open your doors to the human world, your daughter dies. So like, I totally get that, like, you don't want to do it anymore. The world would understand. But Wonder Woman is a mainstay of the DC Comics landscape. And so you need, even if it's not necessarily Diana Prince herself, somebody out there who's playing that role and doing that thing, right? And so ultimately, Hippolyta Hippolyta basically puts the 3 most likely women through a test to basically, present to them the mantle of Medusa, right? And the idea is only those individuals who are pure of heart can look on the face of Medusa and survive the experience. And so 2 of the girls bail out, and Nubia is just like, whatever, right? Like, if I end up entombed in this thing, that's fine, keep the birds off of me, but somebody's got to play this role. Somebody's got to be the new Wonder Woman. The result of this is that when the box is opened, Hippolyta actually gives Nubia the crown to Themyscira. And the reason why is because Hippolyta herself is getting ready to leave Themyscira, go out into the world of man, and find out what happened to her daughter. But somebody has to rule Themyscira while she's away, and that's the mantle that Nubia is taking. Now, if I'm being honest here, the requirement to be the queen of Themyscira seems pretty low if all you have to do is just be willing to face the mantle of Medusa, but the consequence of doing that is also pretty intense, that you don't really die, you're just etched in stone forever, so you're literally just entombed for all eternity, which is a pretty steep price to pay. So I guess that kind of shows a sort of courage and conviction that's necessary for somebody to be queen. But the big talking point here is also a girl by the name of Yara. And Yara is kind of like this Amazon of Brazil, as they address her. We don't really know much about her. There's not really anything that's being revealed here. This is the first time we ever really get to see her. We do kind of see her for like a brief moment, right? When she's talking to her aunt, and her aunt's basically telling her it's kind of the repeat of the Wonder Woman story. You can't go out there into the world. It's too dangerous. It's too scary. We're trying to keep you protected, trying to keep you safe, yada, yada, yada. The same kind of stuff that you saw with the traditional Wonder Woman story. So while it can kind of go both ways in the sense of like, this is awesome that we're seeing it, at the same time, it can kind of be like, I've seen this story before. Give her something a little more interesting. It looks like that's what we're going to get is, again, with Becky Cloonan writing. For those of you guys who are a little hesitant about Wonder Woman, Becky Cloonan's writing it. So my general rule, and I don't know if it really amounts to anything, my general rule when it comes to Becky Cloonan, if she writes it, I will read it. And then maybe it's a story that I'm not a huge fan of, and then I'll stop reading it. But she's not one of those writers where I look at it and right off the bat, I'm just kind of like, I don't know if I'll get it or not. I always read at least the first story arc of everything Becky Cloonan writes. And so from there, you kind of, again, you have Wonder Woman sort of traveling around, kind of bouncing from one location to the next. One of the cooler things that her and Spectre end up doing is actually traveling to Metropolis to basically see the arrival of a villain called the Maw. Now, the Maw itself is not the concern here. The concern is Jonathan Kent, right? That Jonathan Kent is basically taking on the mantle of Superman now and operating in Metropolis, which really seems to give credence to the idea that Superman himself, that Clark Kent is going to be operating on a far more broad scale, and that he'll arrive to help Jonathan only when he really needs it. Whether or not that'll play out, we don't really know, because we know that after Brian Michael Bendis's Action Comics and Superman was not great, that a lot of work is being done to revamp Superman and to change things, so we don't know exactly what new direction the series is going to go in. If it was Brian Michael Bendis continuing it, I would just say, no, they're probably gonna be fighting side by side. But it's a whole new writer, a whole new team. They're, what they're gonna do with it, we don't really know. They could just completely reshuffle everything. But the important thing here is that based on Future State, we saw that Jonathan Kent basically became a bad guy, right? He became a villain, effectively a tyrant. And so because of that, the big concern here is that will be his future, right? That future is guaranteed to come to pass. That's one of those examples of when DC was talking about how Future State was something that may or may not happen. The reality is what comes out of Future State as something that will eventually take place in DC Comics, what elements they will include, depends entirely on us as the readers. Did we buy those comics? Were they like really popular? Did they get good reviews? If it was a comic that we hated and nobody liked, then like you're not going to see anything come out of it with it. It'll just be like, well, it was a possible timeline, and it'll just be a hand wave. That's it. It doesn't matter. So because of that, with Jonathan, the Spectre is super wary of him, because when he flies headlong into the Maw, he demonstrates a few things that make the Spectre concerned, right? That the Maw basically uses time and space as a weapon. And so to fly into and attack the Maw means to end up in any point in time and space. There's no guarantee. And that while he does have the powers of Superman, at the end of the day, he seems to be headstrong and he seems to be reckless. And that's something that Superman cannot be. That in being reckless, that is easy to also get emotional, right? Recklessness is usually the result of a highly emotional state. Otherwise, you would be logical. And so because of that, that issue, that with Jonathan Kent having been through so much over the course of his life, right? Being through instances where he was whisked away by Jor-El into space and taking on this kind of crazy mission, right? And having a partnership with Damian Wayne, only to have it yanked away. In having it, being tormented by his father who was crazy in the future, spending 1,000 years, even beyond that, hanging out with the Legion of superheroes that in an exceedingly short amount of time, he's gone through a litany of emotionally struggling issues. And so because of that, it could easily turn him into a tyrant. And so what he ends up doing here is actually flying through the Maw all the way back to the point where the Maw was, when it was essentially exceedingly young, when it had gotten lost from its own group or its own race or what have you. And in that feeling of loneliness, it became bitter. And so in that bitterness, it somehow arrived here after becoming a villain and just causing pain and torment everywhere it went. What Jonathan does is take it back to where it was originally supposed to be, essentially sealing the rift, completing the circle, and of course, the Maw basically ceases to exist, right? But it's one of these things where it's kind of like, okay, like this is a scenario whereby Jonathan is doing the right thing, right? He's showing empathy, he's showing compassion. Those are not the characteristics of a tyrant. And so it's really DC kind of saying like, hey, like, will Jonathan become a bad guy? Will he not become a bad guy? Stay tuned and find out. I think this is a terrible direction for him to go in. I just want to see Jonathan hanging out with Damian Wayne again and having adventures and being fun. Like, I just want to see that, right? Super Sons was probably the best thing coming out of DC Rebirth at that point in time, and it sucked that DC canceled it because it was amazing. It was such an amazing story. It was just good old-fashioned fun. Again, they kind of bounce around here. One of the really cool things to come out of here, and this is something that I really want to address here, is the character of Kelly, right? Kelly was an awesome character that was brought in by Brian Michael Bendis when he was doing Young Justice. Young Justice was one of my personal comics. For those of you guys who don't know, there's comics out there that I just never cover on the channel, right? I just read them because I enjoy them, and I don't really want to make videos on them because I feel like, you know, it's fun to have my own comic that I read just for the sake of me, without any kind of expectation that like I'm going to talk about it, offer my thoughts on it, or anything along those lines. I know you guys are the same way, right? You guys have those same comics on your own. Kelly was a character who actually discovered a person, or really like an alien that was dying, that crash landed on Earth, that had the ability to tap into the Green Lantern Central Power Battery, and that's why she has a kind of equipment that she does. But in doing that, she's not truly a Green Lantern in the traditional sense, but she is able to manipulate the willpower aspect of the emotional spectrum the same way a Green Lantern can. And so what you have here is John Stewart and Simon Baz bringing her from Earth to the Guardians of the Universe on the planet Oa, so they can analyze her and decide whether or not she's someone who can go forward as a Green Lantern. I will read this. I am so reading this. Like, it looks so much fun. It looks amazing. I am so excited for this. Like, I can't wait to see Kelly as a Green Lantern, because it looks like her stories look like they're gonna be amazing. Like, they look like they're gonna be so much fun. And the Green Lantern mythos needs this coming out of like Grant Morrison's run. Like, it needs just like, hey guys, like, I'm Kelly, I'm a kid, and I got a Green Lantern ring. Like, I need that. I need that so bad. Because can you guys imagine what her constructs would look like as a Green Lantern? It'd be like the coolest thing ever, right? You got like Doomsday who shows up on Earth, and then here comes Kelly, and he's just getting pummeled by like a giant teddy bear. You know, like, you've been a bad boy, Doomsday. I think it'd be amazing. I think it'd be hilarious. And so ultimately, Wonder Woman is brought back to the Quintessence with, you know, basically realizing the threat that she was concerned of doesn't really seem to exist. And she's offered a role at their side, and then ultimately turns it down, right? And basically saying like, what you guys are offering here is a great opportunity, right? To become part of the Quintessence, this super powerful group of individuals who are tasked with safeguarding and overlooking the multiverse and making sure that things kind of stay in working order, in effect. But I have to turn your offer down. And the reason why is because Earth is my home, and those are my friends and my family. My job is to be a superhero. My job is to look at humanity and to give them the possibility of a better life. And so if that's the case, if ushering them into a better future is really the role that I was meant for, I can't do that here. I can't do that amongst you guys. And so ultimately, she ends up traveling back to Earth. And so now I'm really excited to read Becky Cloonan's run. Now here's the cool thing, right? Here's the coolest thing about this, the epilogue, which is drawn by, it looks like John Romita Jr. You can usually always tell it's him because the characters always look like blocks, right? They like, it's literally, he literally just sketches squares and then like they become arms and legs. It's, I was never a huge fan of his art style. The thing here is that you have the Quintessence who kind of looks upon what's called the Omega Earth, right? Kind of like or at least their main base of operations, actually. And talking about like the Omega Earth, or Earth Omega, which is, you know, kind of like this, where really it looks like they're turning it into a prison planet for various people who are out there and are bad guys. But in essence, they're kind of like this threat that Wonder Woman Robin was so concerned about. If she had joined us, she would have realized we already contained it, right? So they basically lied about there not really being a credible threat out there. They lied, but they didn't lie, right? They're like Obi-Wan, right? Like many of the truths that we see, or, you know, from our own point of view, or whatever it was that he said. It's very much that way, that there was a threat out there that Wonder Woman did need to legitimately be concerned about, but that threat has since been quelled. And it was quelled by the Quintessence. Because what they talk about here is that with the power they have, there's literally nothing out there that they cannot control or defeat. Well, then suddenly this disembodied voice is like, die, right? And basically just kills the entirety of the Quintessence, right? Kills the whole Quintessence, only for us to find out this is not just Darkseid, this is true form Darkseid, which is kind of ironic because true form Darkseid was kind of like a concept that Grant Morrison may or may not have made up. Really, it was just a way for fans, like true form Darkseid was a fan creation, and it was just a way for fans to try to find a way to justify how it was that Darkseid being killed by like Doomsday, for example, didn't end the multiverse, but Darkseid dying during Grant Morrison's final crisis resulted in the multiverse essentially dying, right? It was a way to kind of square that circle and to basically say, well, that was true form Darkseid, right? All the other ones were just facsimiles of Darkseid and kind of calling it a day. It makes sense and it's a smart move, but this is Darkseid in its most pure form. And he even goes as far as to say, all those facets of myself, because the multiverse has been restored, all those former facets of myself that existed before Crisis on Infinite Earths, the one that existed after Crisis, the one that existed before Final Crisis and after the New 52, right? They've all been absorbed back into me. I'm more powerful than I've ever been. I am the final version of myself, right? So this is in effect the true form Darkseid. But with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. Let me know what parts of Infinite Frontier you're most excited about. Oh, the list, that's right. Okay, so in March of this year, we get Action Comics, we get Batman, we get Batman Superman, we get Batman Urban Legends, which is the #1 issue. That looks cool. Detective Comics, of course, keeps going on. Catwoman is continuing, The Flash is continuing, Harley Quinn is getting a new solo series, no surprise. The Joker is getting a new solo series. He hasn't had one of those for like 3 decades, so that's gonna be cool. Justice League is continuing, Nightwing's continuing, Suicide Squad gets a new #1. We knew that was coming. Superman's continuing. The Swamp Thing, he gets a new #1. Teen Titans Academy looks awesome. I'm excited for that. That's the #1. Wonder Woman's continuing on. In April, we get Green Lantern #1, which is cool. In May, we get Mr. Miracle, The Source of Freedom, which is going to be I don't know if it's a one-shot or a mini-series. Robin's getting his own solo series. Stargirl is getting a spring break special, so that's basically going to be a platform issue. It's one of those where it's like, if you care, we'll continue it. If you don't, we won't. There's Wonder Girl, of course, which is going to be really, really awesome. And then in June, you get Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, which I'm really excited about. And then in the summer, you get Infinite Frontier #1, right? I have no idea what that's supposed to be, but it looks like it's going to be really, really cool. I'm excited for it, guys. But anyway, we're going to bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Core. If you guys enjoy this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.